welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode, I actually plan on making this episode earlier, but, I was like, whatever. But then I decided, I'll do it now. Because they decided to just keep making the iron hot. Very interesting. Now, you might say, well, shouldn't this wait for when you do an episode about them when you inevitably get to them for your main series? Well, you see, with lefty parties, you kind of have to go in order. I've kind of been jumping around orders sometimes, so I do kind of have to. I kind of want to actually try to focus and make it actually in order. So, actually, chronologically, it makes sense that I make them in this way. So, for example, I'll just say it, the next party history video that's going to be pretty long, that I'm actually pretty much done editing right now, is one about the Socialist Labor Party. And then after that, I'll do the Communist Party. And then after that, it's other parties like the Socialist Workers' Party, the Workers' World Party, PSL. Because the fall of one is sort of the rise of the next, or not even just the fall, they will lead into the next thing. Socialist Workers' Party is made up of dissenters from the Communist Party, Workers' World Party people are made out of dissidents of the Socialist Workers' Party, and PSL people are people who left the Workers' World Party, like that. Especially considering with these lefty parties, you have to do it in a certain way. For example, for my American Independent Party video, for my Libertarian Party video, and my Conservative, Constitution Party video, I don't necessarily have to go into, the in-depths of the past. I don't have to be in this year, long before the party officially got founded, this group was blah, blah, blah. They, left this party to do this and blah, blah, blah. But, I don't have to do that for them. For their histories, you can mostly just chop it up to, the day they're founded. There's no need for me to go in depth about, what did the Libertarian Party guy do in, the 3 years before he formed his party? Because, he didn't do anything of relevancy that actually dictates what the Libertarian Party did. He founded the Libertarian Party, in that span, it was in the same year. It was founded it ran its first candidate in the same year it was founded. Meanwhile, leftist parties, you kind of have to go in depth about, how did they get to where they are now? Why did this group get created when there was already, 3 other major groups? Well, they were a part of one of these 3 major groups, but had a disagreement with them on something. That sort of thing. And for my main series videos, I try to be as objective can be. I try to insert my opinion on these things, very relatively small. I make a jab at, certain groups in the party or things, here and there. For example, I'm pretty sure in my American Independent Party, I, knock them, of course, for being, white nationalists. But, I try to be as objective as can be in regards to, how I talk about them. For my podcast, yes, I'll, of course, try to look into the facts, but it's also a lot more off the cuff, a lot less research really needed. You get my, inner thoughts on these topics and such. Okay, now that we got all that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, Matt Gaetz. Gatesgate, as it's been called. Matt Gaetz is being investigated over possible sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl. Representative Matt Gaetz is being investigated by the Justice Department over whether he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and paid for her travel with him, the New York Times reported on Tuesday, citing 3 people briefed on the matter. If Gaetz paid for a 17-year-old he was engaged with sexually to travel with him, it could constitute a violation of federal sex trafficking laws. You see, because that was actually a thing that was trending on Twitter. It was Matt Gaetz is a sex trafficker. Well, it technically qualifies. That's not necessarily what people would think when they hear the term sex trafficker. They think Gaetz is taking her to be have sex with someone else. But instead, he was just doing it for him. Now, we don't know 100% if this is true or not. There's evidence being shown to certain people. Reportedly, Matt Gaetz apparently showed nudes of her on the House floor to his colleagues, which is I guess I'll say it because this is the only comparison I can give to it. He literally John Chris Felucci'd himself. Literally. John Chris Felucci, the guy who created Ren and Stimpy, did literally the exact same thing. Okay, well, not literally the exact same thing. The difference was it was a 12-year-old girl, and, aside from the age difference, it pretty much 100% the same thing. Well, I guess technically, I don't know what the relationship he had with the 17-year-old girl is. I think it's just that they were in a relationship, I think. For John K., it was that, and she was also working for him, I think. So, it was 2 levels of bad. Now, I don't know if I believe this or not. It's possible, 100%. But there is one piece of evidence that makes me lean in the realm of possibility. Because, right before this was trending on Twitter, Matt Gaetz was trending on Twitter for something different. He was trending on Twitter for the fact that he wanted to resign early so that he could possibly join up with Newsmax and become an anchor for them. Which many people were like, that's weird. Why would he want to do this? Most members of the House, they'll not run for another term, but they won't, resign immediately to become an anchor on Newsmax. But then, literally right around the time that trended, this story dropped, so it's okay, maybe this makes sense, 100%. Maybe he wanted to get out of, federal, he wanted to get the Roger Ailes, the Roger Ailes treatment and, get it off his back. Once you become a media figure, all of a sudden, these allegations will disappear. For a politician, if you get these allegations, you lose, and you might get thrown in jail. For media figures, unless you're Bill Cosby, you get nothing. Okay, so the next story is coming from Arizona. Arizona ICE jailed violated prisoners' rights and failed to prevent COVID-19 outbreak. In Arizona, a new investigation has revealed staff at the privately run immigration jail, La Palma Correctional Center, violated multiple pandemic protocols, verbally assaulted prisoners, and attacked them with pepper spray during a peaceful protest. The report by the Homeland Security Department's Office of the Inspector General says staff at La Palma failed to enforce masks and social distancing protocols, contributing to a massive spread of the COVID-19 cases. The report also found that staff often refused to provide medical treatment to prisoners, and in many cases didn't refill the prescriptions, including for a cancer patient who ran out of leukemia medication. That's definitely bad. Now, it was apparently a private institution for some reason that should definitely be not a private institution that is able to do this. Absolutely should never be that. But the argument is this is obviously a bad thing, and the Biden admin should definitely 100% prevent this. But this also raised some concerns because apparently there was a controversy surrounding Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because of course it was, where she, quote-unquote, defended Biden's immigration policies, which she didn't. She said that they were not as bad as Trump's. And, I don't know the ins and outs 100%, but, at a first glance, yeah, it does seem like they're less bad than Trump. This, of course, being a glaring outlier, but again, it's a private institution, so yeah, that's definitely one thing. If that was anything that was instituted during the Biden admin, making private institutions able to do this, that's definitely a bad sign, and that definitely would be worse than the Trump admin if the Trump admin didn't do that. But one of the things people have been trying to latch onto is the fact that, she stated that what happened was not as bad, particularly in regards to the child attainment policy, which is true. I mean, there's an article that went into the idea, technically, yes, Biden is continuing detaining children that are at the border. The difference is what he is doing and how long it is being done for, and, et cetera, et cetera. For example, like I said, the child detainment policies. For the Trump administration, it was apparently that they would detain all children at the border at one point. Regardless if you could verify if they came with a parent, if they came with their brothers, if they came with their aunts, if they came with a stranger, they would take away the kids. And then, deport the parents, and then the end. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, it's more like a take the kids, verify that the person is who they say they are, and not from their parents, particularly from their grandparents that are older siblings, and then take them away and try to verify the identities of them, but not deport the individuals in question. Keep them around, but keep them separated. And yes, that is a bad thing. And the article goes in depth about that will still psychologically screw up the kid. But at the end of the day, they're going back to their guardian at one point if they can verify the truth. Meanwhile, as AOC states, the Trump administration, there's questions on whether or not any of the people that they were separated from will ever get to see their parents again, because their administration handled it so bad. They were just I don't even think they wrote down their names, pretty much. It's effectively, you could argue both are bad, and she says point blank, both are barbaric. And I agree, yes, both are bad things, but which is worse? And she tries to state that objectively, she views that what the Trump administration did is effectively worse. Okay, so the next story comes from Seattle, and oh boy, it's a doozy. Remember Kshama Sawant and how she's fighting a recall effort? It's finally beginning. The courts ruled that she can 100% be recalled, and of course, the media and all the companies that tried to get rid of her the last time around. Yeah, she's they're trying again. They know this is our last chance to get rid of her, so this is what they're gonna do. Now, one thing I should say is that it 100% sucks that the recall has literally just been completely bastardized, really. The recall effort was supposed to be the people rising up against their elected officials and officially trying to get them so that they could be gotten rid of. But now all the recall efforts are mostly led by people who have millions of dollars and are doing it for 100% bad reasons. Gray Davis being recalled, that was good. Yes, because Gray Davis is being recalled. He's not necessarily a good politician. However, the people who were trying to recall him were doing it for pretty bad intentioned reasons. It was to instill a right-wing governor. The current California gubernatorial recall is a similar example. He's 100%, he's not a good politician, but they're trying to get rid of him because of right-wing reasons. And the same thing is happening to Kshama Sawant. And especially considering Amazon spent millions of dollars, they're trying to get rid of her the first time around. They're going to spend $1 million, more than $1 million to get rid of her again. And hopefully we're going to be able to stop them again. Okay, so the next story is from the Senate. Chuck Schumer eyes second shot at raising the minimum wage through reconciliation. Chuck Schumer is considering putting a $15 minimum wage, which will be on the next reconciliation package, which will be focused on infrastructure. Multiple sources familiar with the New York Senator's thinking told The Intercept. Now, Chuck, I get why Chuck is trying to posture on the idea of fighting for the minimum wage, because he's scared of a left-wing primary challenge come 2022. AOC is the primary focus of that, push. But, it's not just her. There's potential it could be someone else, like Bill de Blasio or Jamal Bowman. Not Jamal Bowman. I was going to say someone else, but, there were other names just like Alessandra Biaggi. That's probably not how you pronounce her name, but, you get what I'm saying. There's many people who could primary him, but AOC is the one with the most focus on, given, the boogeyman status that she's given to by literally everybody. Now, in regards to this, Chuck, it's cool if you're doing it, but I got to see it. You capitulated last time, so, what do you expect us to do? Well, I guess technically he didn't capitulate last time. He kind of did, he kind of didn't. It was the other senators' fault, apparently, but, he probably should have, whipped his senators to put them in place, but, you know what I mean. That's what he should have done things, but it's if he's gonna do it now, fine, good, do it now. Or, do it whenever this happens. But, I'll believe it when I see it. That's all I have to say, Chuck. You don't got the good track record in regards to this issue. It's not like you campaign really hard on it like other people. You don't got it. You don't really got it. Okay, so the next 3 stories are coming from Mexico. A negative, a positive, and something in the middle. First, here's the negative. Let's get that out of the way first. Mexico's real COVID-19 death toll now stands at over 321,000. Mexico's government acknowledged Saturday that the government's true death toll from the coronavirus pandemic now stands above 321,000, almost 60% more than the official test confirmed number of 201,429. Mexico does little testing because hospitals were overwhelmed. Many Mexicans died at home without getting a test. The only way to get a clear picture is to review excess deaths and review death certificates. On Saturday, the government quietly published such a report, which found that there were 2,904,287 deaths linked to COVID-19 from the start of the pandemic through February 14th, and it confirmed a lot more. So now, I made the argument many times that Mexico is technically doing better and worse in regards to this pandemic. Better and worse in certain degrees. I've always made this case. Population-wise, they're not doing so hot. Given their population, they have a higher death count than, the United States. But overall, in a number that people would probably argue is more important, the number of people who are actually dead, they're doing fine, at least better compared to the U.S., but again, it's also because smaller country. That's definitely a critique I should give AMLO. To be fair, they give the explanation, the hospitals were overwhelmed, and yeah, Mexico is an arguably poor country, so they definitely are a bit overwhelmed in regards to certain things. So, you praise them where you can, and you critique them when they can't. Okay, now let's move on to the next story, which is the, mixed one. Mexican's gubernatorial races have been a bit interesting. You see, the gubernatorial races as they are now, they're, again, mixed. They're gubernatorial races. We've talked about it in a previous episode, but here we should give a bit of a breakdown for the current ones, because polling has changed a bit. The Mexico's gubernatorial races as they are now, Morena is slated to win 8 gubernatorial, governorships: Baja California, Campeche, Colima, Nayarit, Sinaloa, Sonora, Tlaxcala, and Zacatecas. The PAN party is slated to receive 4: Baja California Sur, Chihuahua, Querétaro, and San Luis Potosi. The Citizens Movement is slated to get 1 governorship, Nuevo León, and 2 states that are currently in limbo are Guerrero and Michoacan. Now, I should argue some of those polls are definitely mixed, and it's things where it's Morena candidate in Nuevo León, it's been a swing state for a while. Some polls PRI wins, some polls PAN wins, some polls Morena wins, but the current polls say, like the current poll says Citizens Movement is winning, but there's a reason why 2 states are currently, I don't know. Guerrero and Michoacan both had their Morena candidates removed from the ballot. Guerrero, we've talked about before, had the infamous candidate Felix, who's like the one Morena candidate that I just couldn't support because he's accused of being a rapist, and for some reason Morena decided to let him back on the ballot, but then him and their candidate in Michoacan, Raul Moron, is like they were pulled because apparently they didn't file at the exact right time and didn't receive their candidate reports in time. But the Michoacan one is currently being decided on. Morena is currently looking into Moron and basically saying, hey, we appeal this decision, let's see what's up. I don't know what they're going to do with Felix, and I don't care. Felix, if he's gone, good riddance. If he's not, oh well. I ain't supporting him either way, so it doesn't matter to me. And the last story is a good thing and a bad thing because of certain things. Now, here's the thing. AMLO, the president of Mexico, has just sent a bill to Congress that would reform the country's hydrocarbon law to give Pemex greater control over the domestic fuel market, basically helping renationalize Mexico's petroleum industry. Now, that's a good thing because it's a popular policy that was one of the major key factors for AMLO getting elected in the first place, and it was instituted by one of Mexico's most popular presidents, and a majority of the Mexican populace love this idea. But it's bad because it means time to kickstart the Mexican regime change idea because, media, they ain't exactly been too kind with this. Bloomberg is the news source that I pulled this from, and here's how they title it. Mexico's AMLO plays energy nationalism card ahead of key vote. Bill would be the greatest blow yet to landmark energy reforms. Courts foiled past attempts to regain state energy dominance. You see, that plays 3 cards at once. One, that AMLO is playing a card, and they use the term nationalism, wink wink. It says that it's the biggest blow to a landmark energy reform bill, so people who do not know what this energy reform bill did or anything already has a good idea of it. Like, you wouldn't necessarily call something bad a landmark. Landmark indicates good. And third, that courts foiled past attempts to do this, indicating that AMLO is undemocratic. It's of course the big ploy of he's evil, undemocratic guy, blah blah blah. And again, why I need to dust off the old hashtag hands off Mexico, because again, we're going to be seeing some regime change in Mexico coming soon. I mean, I've been at the forefront of this issue for a while. I was saying that Mexico's major parties were going to form a big electoral coalition to try and stop AMLO. They did just that. I pointed out the fact that one of the guys who's been AMLO's fiercest critic tried to literally undemocratically take over his party. I mean, I was there for that. I've been reporting on the very bad things that the Mexican right has been trying to do to try and stop AMLO. Here we are. This is definitely a thing that's happening, and we need to show we ain't screwing around. Okay, now that we got all that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. Oh boy, this is a thing that I'm going to have to talk about because, this is a very big problem that could potentially be harmful the more we think about it. Now, for those who do not know who I'm referring to, the SEP, or the Socialist Equality Party, as you read in the title of this video more than likely, is, of course, by its name, a socialist political party, particularly of the Trotskyist trend. Now, there is a likelihood that you'd have never heard of the Socialist Equality Party until, like, this week or the last week, because of some controversy that they got into that led to a lot of the group going upwards. Now, one place you may be familiar with is the World Socialist website, because I've actually used them as some of the sources for some of the stories that I have talked about on this podcast. And to a degree, they're a pretty good source. Now, of course, if I had known the World Socialist website was the paper of a political party, I probably would have reconsidered, doing that. And they don't necessarily advertise that they are as much as you would think. Now, technically it's not false advertising because it's in the little bar that you click on. Like, you click on the bar and it's like, oh, Socialist Equality Party. So it's technically false advertising. But it is, a source from it's party's newspaper. That's what it is. Now, the party actually has a history within leftist circles, but we'll get to it when we get to it. First, we're going to talk about why they're in the news now. Well, one of their prominent writers, Eric London, wrote a piece called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Denounces Socialists and Praises Biden Administration. Definitely a heck of a headline, 100%. And he spread that around, and of course, the anti-AOC quote-unquote left pounced on it and ate it up and was like, Eric London's such a brilliant man and blah, blah, blah. Like all that jazz. And, many people were like, oh, that's interesting. But the fact of the matter is, one of the biggest issues that seemed very immediate when I clicked on the article was the fact that he didn't link it. He talks about the interview that AOC did, and he didn't link the actual interview they did, to the point where there were some people who actually legitimately believed that AOC gave an interview to Eric London. I had to correct the label to some people because they legitimately thought that AOC gave an interview to Eric London where she exposed herself, or he misrepresented what she said in the interview. But he was literally writing a piece about a currently existing piece, again, without linking it. So I actually had to track down the actual interview that she did, and then actually decided to look into what he meant. A lot of other people did not. They just took their preconceived notions and ran with it, either saying that, oh, AOC is in the right, and nothing can be wrong, and Eric London's a liar. And also people, of course, on the anti-AOC side that were take anything they can to make AOC look bad and jump on it. So first, I wanted to discuss the fact that in the article, he says that she called socialists bad actors. That is not true at all. The question that was posed to her was, some on the left have looked at Biden's record and his differences with Bernie wing of the party, and they conclude that no progress is going to come out of the Biden administration. What is your view? She said, I think that is a very privileged critique. We are going to have to focus on solidarity with one another, developing our senses of good faith critique and bad faith critique, because bad faith critique can destroy everything we have built so swiftly, and we know this because it has in the past, and it's taken us many decades to get to this point. We have no time or luxury to entertain bad faith actors in our movement, but also we have to value our solidarity with one another. For anyone who brings it up, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the message that you are sending to your black and brown and undocumented members of your community, to your friends, when you say that nothing has changed, perhaps not enough has changed, and that is not a semantic argument. Just the other night, we in collective struggle were able to stop deportations of critical members of our community, and that would not have happened in a Trump administration. Completely rational argument, where AOC states that she believes that certain things in the, Biden does things better than Trump, and that people who are of the belief that Biden is bad, therefore literally nothing ever can be accomplished and we should just give up, are bad faith actors. Now, given the fact that Eric London immediately jumped on the idea that she said socialists were bad faith actors, what does that have to say about Eric London's political beliefs? Does he believe that he is a person who legitimately doesn't want to work within the political system? Well, the answer is yes, because that's just who the Socialist Equality Party is, and we'll get into that. But first, let's go a little bit more. The fact of the matter is that they also talk about human rights, because that's one of the things that they critiqued. They are like, oh, AOC thinks that people who disagree with her don't believe in human rights. And she talks about the fact that they want to build a multiracial coalition, and takes a jab at class reductionists who make everything about class and remove literally every single other element. I wonder why Eric London would have a problem with that. But anyways, and lastly, the praise of the Biden administration is not. He talks about like, oh, the Democratic establishment completely transforming themselves. But what she's actually referring to is the Democratic members of Congress who are like, hey, we don't want to get primaried, so it's best that we change our mind and support certain things. Now, again, most of that stuff seems completely reasonable. I wouldn't see why Eric London would have a problem, or Socialist Equality Party or World Socialist website. Why would they have a problem with any of the stuff she said? Well, of course, they have policy disagreements. Them being Trotskyists, her not. And this is where we kind of have to get into the Socialist Equality Party themselves. You see, given the Socialist Equality Party's relatively small stance, especially in the third party scene, really, let's be honest, they have effectively done nothing. They don't publish their numbers because they don't want to, because their latest presidential election status got 345 votes. So it's fair to say maybe they're not as popular as they would like you to believe, especially considering London himself has kind of stated he believes that the Socialist Equality Party is literally at the leading end of the worker struggle against capitalism, and that sort of leads into a broader problem with them. You see, the thing about the SEP here is their manifesto, I guess you could say. The Socialist Equality Party is a political party of and for the working class. The SEP seeks not to reform capitalism, but to create socialist, democratic, and egalitarian society through the establishment of a workers' government and the revolutionary transformation of the world economy. We seek to unify workers in the United States and internationally in the common struggle for socialism, that is, for equality and the rational and democratic utilization of wealth of the planet. Sounds simple enough, right? Again, that sounds simple enough, and if you took that on its face value, you would say, yeah, they seem fine. However, the Socialist Equality Party, and this is just how I first saw them, because, no offense to, Eric London, he seems like a nice guy, he's a good egg, he's a smart egg, I'll give him that, he is somewhat intelligent, I'll give him that. That sounds condescending. I don't want to sound condescending. Well, not all the time, but you know what I mean. He seems like a smart guy. He reads books. He writes articles. I write articles. I would consider myself somewhat smart. So I guess technically Eric London is as smart as me. I can at least say that. He's written books, so maybe he's slightly smarter than me. Yeah, so, this isn't even, a diatribe on, the entirety of the party. Maybe the 10 people in charge, but not the 200 people that are not in charge. But, or at least not at the moment. But we'll get to that. I keep saying we'll get to that, but then we'll never get to it. But, anyways, one red flag for me was that an interview he did. In the interview he did... he seemed just a generally, like an egghead. But, there was one part that really, struck me, ooh, really? He, railed really hard against union leaders. He was I forget what he said, but it was basically those, he was calling union leaders, people who, who get served steak dinner, who, cozy up to the bourgeoisie, stuff like that. And that made me go that's weird. Turns out that's actually kind of the ideology of the Socialist Equality Party. They don't believe in unions. They are of the belief that unions have effectively become a part of the bourgeoisie politics, so they are effectively meaningless. And in fact, during this famous Amazon union struggle, they actually opposed the idea of Amazon forming a union. And, like, no offense, but, like, given Eric London's look and, like, the look of the majority of the rest of the party members that I know of, and the fact that, like, you know, he railed against, like, union leaders, gave me a good indication that the Socialist Equality Party wasn't the best idea. Like, not the best idea for them. Of course, they have the right to express whatever political views they want, and no one can take that away from them. But, like, an idea for someone like me to take them 100% seriously, because it was pretty evident, like, yeah, these guys are class reductionists. Like, that, like, they just give off the vibe of, like, the guy who sits there, who, like, puts up their glasses and goes, like, you haven't read every single book of Leon Trotsky? Ugh. You clearly cannot understand the struggle of the working man as much as I have. Son, I've been working in the coal mines for 34 years. I'm about to lose my pension. Ugh. Disgusting. You know, that's just the general vibe that I got from them. And for the record, that wasn't me, like, implying Eric was that. I think I should make that 100% clear. I'm not implying that that's Eric. I'm implying that's if the Socialist Equality Party manifested into a person, which I just generally view as, like, a nerdy kind of person. And I mean, their like, notions in this field are pretty well known amongst leftists. You know, they went into a young DSA conference, and, like, they went to Left Forum, and, like, they frequently attack other leftist parties. You know, like, they attack DSA often, they attack the Socialist Workers' Party often, they attack the Greens and stuff, and many people view them as a very big detriment. Like, the Socialist Workers' Party point out the fact that the Socialist Equality Party, this is a quote from them, their paper The Militant, those active in the Socialist Equality Party and the workers in the World Socialist website don't build up solidarity or participate in working class resistance. Instead, Rosenfield said, they intervene in an effort to turn workers against their union, often targeting those frustrated in the course of the struggle. And they go on to cite the fact that they seem to, like, pushing, like, very anti-union stuff to union workers in an effort to, like, the idea is, like, oh, we're leftier than thou. We know the working class guys better than you do. And while they're trying to do it in the way, like, they believe that there's a different way, there many people argue, like, bro, stop that. All you're doing is hurting unions when you do this. Many of these people view them as incredibly toxic. For example, during Left Forum, an individual with the name of Frank Benner was, attending, and he was at the panel, and at one point, he was introduced as a person who wrote articles for the Workers' Socialist website. Left Forum is known for, like, where leftists go to discuss their political ideas and, like, their plans and etc., etc. The Socialist Equality Party members, they didn't really do anything at the meeting. They just basically stood there and did nothing. But then one of the leaders of the SEP, Bill Van Auken, basically went up to Frank Benner and yelled at him, "You're a fraud," because of the fact that he was introduced as a person who wrote for the Workers' Socialist website, even though he wasn't an SCP member, and he actually critiqued the SCP. And then at one point near the end, they're basically like, they asked them, like, hey, you guys want to do questions? Bill Van Auken then gestures to the room and says, "You found your audience." Basically implying that the people at the Left Forum were worthless, and catering to them was nothing, because they don't match up to the SCP standards. Now, one thing that is beneficial about the SCP is the fact that they have, like, their website is their party newspaper. And since they're such a tight-knit group, it's fair to say that an article written by an individual of the party isn't necessarily, like, far off from what the SCP actually believes. And the fact of the matter is, the SCP, again, like, as my stereotype suggested, are pretty class reductionist in their thinking. And their articles really do reflect that. They normally ignore struggles of, like, race and other things, and focus almost extensively on class. Now, that is a problem when a majority of your party is mostly older white men, because it seems like you literally are just, like, swiping the issues under the rug. But two articles I really do think show this part of their ideas into the limelight. For example, their article regarding the 1619 Project. For those who don't know what the 1619 Project is, it was basically a New York Times-led long-form journalism project that basically tried to retell the story of America from a different perspective. Well, of course, we all know the average history story that we all know as of now. You know, America started when the Pilgrims came to the land in Jamestown, and then, you know, white people, but then slavery doesn't come in as a major issue until the 1860s. Basically, rather than framing it like that, they frame the history of America through the idea of 1619, the year that the first slaves came to the United States, and look at history through that lens. Now I don't know the ins and outs 100% of the 1619 Project, but it is worthy to hear the stories of what happened in those time periods, because again, let's be fair, that is a pretty big blind spot for a majority of Americans. We don't really know the history of what was going on with the slaves unless it pertained to white people. The only two slaves that we know in America are Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. Literally every other major historical figure regarding slavery was a white person. John P. Hale, John Brown, Abraham Lincoln, we know them. They're the ones who freed the slaves, who tried to free the slaves. But we don't, what about the slaves? What's their stories? And, it's an interesting perspective that should have been, it was met with praise and criticism. The SCP fell on the line of criticism and flat out stated, quote, "It is a racialist falsification of American and world history." And not just that, they say, quote, "Despite the pretense of establishing the United States' true, quote-unquote, foundation, the 1619 Project is a politically motivated falsification of history. Its aim is to create historical narrative that legitimizes the effort of the Democratic Party to construct an electoral alliance based on prioritizing of personal, quote-unquote, identities, i.e., gender, sexual preference, ethnicity, and, above all, race." Basically, not only are they saying that it's not true, but that it's also, a secret plan to, make people people like their race more. I don't even know what this stupid thing is. They want to form an electoral alliance based on prioritizing of one's personal identities. That's so stupid. And the class reductionists are 100% the reason why socialism did not take off in the United States, or leftism at all. And it was only when leftism actually introduced aspects of people's lives that they actually gave a shit about that they actually moved forward in the United States electoral sphere. I say this over and over again, and I will never stop saying it. The revolution is not going to happen. Nobody cares. No single person in the United States outside of these far left socialist, communist movements care about the socialist revolution. They don't care. What these groups want is healthcare and their prioritized issues fixed. A black worker, no offense, would rather have, the ability to vote, given the fact that he was a former felon for smoking a little weed. He would rather have that problem fixed, or the fact that he doesn't get paid jack shit at his job, rather than, I think we need a socialist revolution. They don't want that, and that's why your movements fail. Literally, I mentioned the Socialist Labor Party before. That is 100% what happened to them. They were not willing to adapt to the growing political sphere and what was actually coming. People didn't care about the worldwide socialist revolution. They cared about their union jobs. They cared about ending imperialism due to the Vietnam War. They cared about racial issues. They cared about sexual issues. They cared about feminism. They cared about that stuff. And the fact that you're not prioritizing that as well as your issues, because just because you add those issues to your platform does not mean you have to get rid of the rest. The Communist Party, that's what they did. They didn't end their idea of a socialist revolution, but they're also hey, we should address the problems currently, and then we can work to that later. That was what exactly, like, that's why the Socialist Labor Party died, and the Communist Party still lives on to this day. Because when they were approached with that basic question, the Communist Party licked their fingers, saw where the wind was blowing, and went that way. Meanwhile, the Socialist Labor Party said, nah, we're gonna go the other way, and then fell off a cliff and died. And if you're a reasonable leftist, you would understand that that's not that's not how it works. That's how the left was able to rise up. The new left that's why the old left died and the new left became a thing. Now, of course, you can have criticisms of the new left. You could say, oh, maybe they veered too far away from that. But now we're at a point where those two points have merged now. They are now one. However, some people do not want them to be one because they don't care. But I think their biggest endeavor into this problem with class reductionism came from their news coverage of the death of Trayvon Martin. You should all know who Trayvon Martin is. He was basically the kid who unfortunately died, but his death was basically what birthed the Black Lives Matter movement. Given the fact that the internet was rising and this case was very widely reported and George Zimmerman literally got nothing. He was pretty much let go. He's like, oh yeah, that's fine. That was pretty much the final straw that made people literally go all right, fine. You ain't gonna do something, we will. And then that's why Black Lives Matter became a thing. As clear-cut as it seems, the SCP seemed to have a slight problem. They were stating the killing of Trayvon Martin is not fundamentally about a race, a fact that is understood by many involved in the demonstrations. There is a sense that the conditions of oppression, inequality, and injustice affect workers of all races and nationalities. Which is really, for lack of a better term, is all lives mattering the, oppression? That's basically what it is. All lives mattering, oppression. Oppression happens to workers of all races. Okay, cool. But we're kind of in the middle of talking about this specific racially charged problem. But the people of all races get oppressed at some point, especially the workers. It's yeah, cool. And we'll get to that when we get to that. But we're kind of in the middle of this specific topic right now. No, workers. This is the discourse that you're getting out of the Socialist Equality Party. And I have no segue for this, but I guess I'll say it. They're Uyghur genocide deniers. That's definitely a thing. Ignore the people who give, frontline interviews to the media and talk about their being genocided. Ignore those things because what I can segue to is there are issues regarding rape. Because the party is kind of weirdly into, rape apologism. Literally. On their website, when you look up, the Me Too, because, they try to brand themselves as a news website, so, of course, they need to do, stories about Me Too. Their tag for Me Too is the Me Too Sexual Misconduct Witch Hunt. A very interesting way to dub sexual assaults. And they've done apologism for, some of the biggest, sexual predators you could think of. Literally, Harvey Weinstein, Brock Turner, and Roman Polanski. They literally did pieces about them. For the Brock Turner one and the Roman Polanski one, they always try to add this little caveat the right-wing campaign to smear them. It's Brock Turner raped people. Screw you, really. And then he got let off the hook, and they take a jab at Joe Biden. This was before the Tara Reade stuff. So if this came after the Tara Reade stuff, they probably would have used that. But Biden, we're talking about Biden said he was furiously angry at what happened and praised the women in the case as a warrior with a steel spine. And it's is this a bad thing? What are you talking about? Now, They just, of course, all that just generally seems to come from, there just seem to be, pretty weird folk, like weird people. However, there's one more problem that is the whole reason that I felt that I needed to make this video. And this just seemed very, very like, whoa, what? And the second I looked into it, I was starting to be like, oh no. Okay, so here's the story of what was happening. I was writing a video for the Socialist Workers' Party, and there's a World Socialist website article, which is sort of what kind of like led me to even know who Eric London was to begin with, talking about James P. Cannon and his secretary Joe Hansen. And there's like a theory that Joe Hansen secretly worked for the GPU, the like Soviet state police, and the people who like killed Leon Trotsky. And I wanted to verify, is this true? Is this true or is this a lie? Because I mean, I didn't know much about them, but during a thing, SCP people got mad at me for saying a thing. I basically made a slight jab about the fact that they don't have that many supporters, and they made up lies. Eric London was on a show and he said the Socialist Workers' Party was basically non-existent, and I said, well, that's kind of a lie, and I worded it that way because it's just a thing. I would just say that to people, just anybody, hey, that's kind of a lie. Just because I say something's a lie does not mean you're a liar. You could not know, you could think it's true. But given who Eric London is, and the fact that he's supposed to be a historian and stuff, and he's written books about this stuff, he should more than likely know the fact that the Socialist Workers' Party is basically non-existent, or at least not entirely so. I 100% will stand by my argument that the Socialist Workers' Party has more members than the Socialist Equality Party, and I can't base this on anything because neither party has officially released the amount of people who are registered with them or are dues-paying members or stuff. My argument will 100% be the Socialist Workers' Party has at least 1,000 to 2,000 to maybe 3,000 members, something along those lines. And I base this on the fact that I see the Socialist Workers' Party a lot more active. I know the thing is, I really do see them a lot more active in state politics and stuff. They'll frequently run candidates, and they'll frequently get decent vote totals. And they seem to have hot spots Washington, New York, New Jersey, Kentucky, Texas. Those are their major cornerstones. They at the very least have an active presence, and they're very ever present in unions. Now, the reason you don't see them as much as you would normally think, given their presence, is the fact that a lot of them are 50 plus, and I'm not entirely sure they're getting new members. The only time they had, I would 100% say half of their, my theory is at the very least they have 500 or 1,000 members that were diehard Peter Camejo supporters, those people who were from that era, and then half of and they got that same number of members, but those are people who were disaffected by Bernie, and then just went in the Socialist Workers' Party direction and then never looked back. That's basically their membership at this point. Whereas the Socialist Equality Party, I haven't really seen anything indicating that they have a higher membership than that. And even then, that's again because socialist parties tend to view not people who literally register as a party member. They would only consider you if you're a dues paying member to be a member because it's oh, you're a union member, you pay your dues. But basically, I was skeptical, not completely oh, he's BS liar, but I was skeptical. The way he turned this AOC thing around doesn't make me 100% view it by, oh, you're just being a little skeptical. This is your third time skewing the facts. So, but I found a rebuttal article talking about it. Now, I didn't go too far in, but I did look. There was one thing that made me go what? It was the second paragraph of this article. After giving it some thought, I decided to have a look at the articles. Although many veterans of the left understand that the Socialist Equality Party is a toxic cult, many less knowledgeable, including Chris Hedges, give it the respect that it does not deserve. And that made me go, that's weird. What? Because, like, as it said right there, even though most veterans on the left understand the SCP is a toxic cult, people who don't know any better will give them more credibility than it deserves. So naturally, I had to just take a look and basically be like, okay, what is it? SEP, Socialist Equality Party cult. What do the results yield? And they didn't yield results that looked positively amongst the Socialist Equality Party. I found two different sources of individuals who were former party members who described the party's cultish-like behavior. And one of them, like, went so far as to say the thing about, like, oh, they didn't support unions anymore. He described his, like, effort as, like, oh, the Socialist Equality Party was a former communist cult that I used to be part of. Another individual called Goofus and Gravitas, they wrote like a multi-part like article talking about like the process of deprogramming, talking about their experience leaving the Socialist Equality Party and their time doing like at the Socialist Equality Party, describing her schedule as basically proofreading articles for the World Socialist website, 4 out of 5 nights a week, 3 out of 6 articles each night, recording and editing the podcast on Wednesday nights, writing articles as I could, acting as elected branch finance officer, attending a branch meeting every other week, and preparing presentations, many of which would be skipped over at the last minute, so wasting my time. All of which free of charge. In fact, quite the opposite. They were charging her because she had to pay her dues. That every day, she basically woke up with, like, she would wake up facing her delegate card, like, she hung it over her bed, and when she woke up, she got up, she's like, my delegate card of the Socialist Equality Party, my goodness. She would work through her family members dying, she would work through her divorce, she would work through everything, basically did everything for the party, and they gave her nothing. Whenever she would make a suggestion during, like, party meetings, one of the most particular ones was the fact that she was suggesting, hey, maybe your vice presidential candidate should be someone who is of legal age to be vice president. I mean, I know we're not running to win, but I think it'd probably be in our best interest to run like that. They could do that. They basically blew her off. Like I said before, she pretty much just worked for exposure for them for like a long time. They wouldn't tell her where the money was coming from or who was giving it to them. Even when she was like a finance officer for her branch of the party, she basically worked herself to the bone for her party. Even when she was like, she had to do something else, she would always do it. And she never once asked for a break. Well, until at one point where she did decide to take a break. And they pretty much ghosted her for that time being. And then personal drama within the party and her basically made her quit. And as soon as she left the party, everybody she knew from the party that were supposedly her friends, gone. The people who like respected her throughout her entire time at the party, all of a sudden they hated her. That she had fallen under alien class forces, their words apparently. And that basically, like, everything she had built for this whole time was for nothing. Literally nothing. She got nothing out of it. And that's when her therapist suggested, hey, maybe you weren't part of a political party. Maybe you were part of a cult. And she, at the very least in that article, says, like, she rejects the notion. But, you know, she admits, like, if you say cultish or cult-like, okay, then you got something there. There was one more article in regards to, like, the SCP's culty-like behavior that I can't find anymore. If any of you can help me, please let me know. It's an article revolving around Julian Assange and their 2020 candidate, Joseph Kasher. There's one part of the article that literally says that there was a Facebook group that talked about the SCP's cultish behavior and was a group of like former members who were trying to spread the word of the SCP's cult-like behavior. but I can't for the life of me find that article. I really can't. I've even tried looking through my internet history and I couldn't find it. Maybe if I do find it, it'll be linked in the description, as well as all of the articles that I talked about from the World Socialist website, from like all these sources, and you're free to look at them however you see fit. You can look at all this and say, hey, I want to wait and see what the Socialist Equality Party's response is, and yeah, cool. You're free, and I'm not even saying you don't even have to like be a member of the SCP, or you don't have to like associate with them. You're free to do it, but I'm just saying, be wary. Like, if you're gonna associate with anybody, have all the information, and this is the information that I have. It's better if we have all the facts out there before anybody like makes any like rash decisions, which is the whole reason why my channel's here. You know, explain the information, get everything out there. Okay, so that's all the information I got today. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.